Come, let us transcend overanalysis, especially for beginners. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. A question that begins, how to stop overanalyzing during meditation? A question that continues, I'm really frustrated with my overanalyzing mind. Whenever I meditate, I also become hyper-aware of everything that goes on in my body and mind. So that my thoughts start to analyze, my thoughts in an infinite regression. But also when I try to just stop the thinking, there comes up the thought of, don't suppress them, that's wrong. So therefore I'm caught in a vicious cycle, as it seems. I have the feeling I'm over-rationalizing and over-complicating the whole process. And therefore always checking if I'm on the right track, which of course destroys my process. Can anybody help me escape that vicious cycle? Thank you for writing. This is an important question and I respect your earnestness. The problem is not yours. The problem is the techniques you've been taught, and quite possibly the teachers who taught them. I'm sorry you've been cheated. And I'm sorry that you've been suffering needlessly. Once again, this is not your fault. I'm going to do my best to teach you what you have already should have been taught by others who have been asleep on the job. Not all overanalysis is created equal. For there is active overanalysis and passive overanalysis. That can be likened to living with a doggy. Active overanalysis would be you or I dragging a reluctant dog on a walk when he would rather be sleeping in his blanket or on his blanket. Passive overanalysis would be us sitting on the couch watching the doggy joyfully have zoomies at Mach 2 with its proverbial hair on fire. There's a huge difference. Let's begin with active analysis, and then we'll look at passive analysis and the secret to transitioning. I feel that viewing meditation through the lens of neuroscience dispels a lot of confusion. And since we're beginning with active analysis, let's explore how we got there. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but no, not in the fun, tingly way. What do we mean by everything sucks? We mean that 90% of meditation teachers are going to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. This rigidity and controlling tendencies are reflected in the manner in which they implore their students to actively concentrate and actively analyze. For the only way to perform those activities is to rely upon discrete mechanisms, such as those found in the medial prefrontal cortex or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is an amazing set of tools that are great if you want to compare, contrast, sort, analyze, calculate, compute, reason, or edit. This is wonderful. But just like a Stradivarius, high-strung and vulnerable, our prefrontal cortex can be overworked. And as we overwork it, our amygdala is stimulated, the seat of aggression and anxiety. And this, of course, will feed the cycle of being more controlling and more rigid and more fearful and more superstitious and so on and so forth. Now for some good news. The prefrontal cortex is not the only game on the block. There are other regions of our central nervous system that have evolved in a manner to make them ideal for both mindfulness and meditation. Let's explore them right now. Let us begin with the seventh fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, mindfulness. Did you know that every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system, which is found in the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us perceive in a very special way, to help us perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. Can you see how this is the opposite of yang? Can you see how this is yin? How this is flexible, loving, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, kind, and rational. So what have we evolved to notice? We evolved to notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We've evolved to notice emotions, attentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We've evolved to notice entire spectrum of phenomena, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Yes, that could feel overwhelming at times. Fortunately, evolution has given us a safety valve. This brings us to the eighth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, meditation. For every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, we are accessing our parasympathetic nervous system, located in both the upper third as well as the lower third of that same spinal cord. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to help us both physically relax as well as mentally release. Now, I promised I would tell you how to do that. How do we switch gears from actively analyzing to merely passively analyzing? The solution is ridiculously easy. When we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, our big old brain cannot help but cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system. Similarly, every time we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, again, this brain of ours cannot help but cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system. And so, as we sit on a proverbial couch, watching our dog joyfully have the dog of our prefrontal cortex joyfully have zoomies, that's fine. We're not actively instigating the analysis, we're just watching it. The only label we need to use is this. The only remedy we need employ is ease. These things are automatic and they're effortless. Think of our central nervous system as a computer. And these are the drivers. Without the drivers, our computer and its software is worthless. They're a very expensive paperweight. With the right drivers, our mind is a lean, mean machine. And so there you have it. This could seem too good to be true. Remember, there are plenty of teachers and plenty of writers who get off on disempowering their students and their readers, who get off on making things more complicated than they really need to be, because doing so makes them feel special, which is really pathetic, is it not? Now, not all bad teachers are malicious. Many are just lazy-minded, whose anemic empathy is not strong enough to overcome their rigidity and their fear and their superstition and their controlling tendencies. Which brings me to an important subject I'd like to explore with you. The more we practice the inhalations, perception, and exhalations, release that the big kids call mindfulness and meditation, the less activated our amygdala will be. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more activated this anterior cingulate gyrus will be, which functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of love and compassion. This is why both Dilgo Kensei, and especially Tulku Thondup emphasized that we cannot concentrate or analyze our way to greater empathy. Concentration analysis will always feed our aggression and anxiety. The only way to experience the highest love, which is spontaneous and uncontrived, is by a regular and effective practice of mindfulness and meditation. But wait, there's more. The more we practice, the more likely that our choices, utterances, and deeds will begin flowing from the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. Not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. If there is such a thing as magic, this is where it lives. This is the flow state. This is, if you dig the Chinese, this is walking with the Tao. If you dig Tantric Buddhism, this is dancing with the dakinis, which is much better than dancing with the stars. This is the juicy bits. This is the expedient means of a Buddha. You see, enlightenment is nothing mystical or magical. It's simply mastery of the Eightfold Path. And here's the wild thing. By simply practicing mindfulness and meditation, the remaining 6 folds of the Eightfold Path take care of themselves spontaneously. What is enlightenment? It is nothing other than mastering the Eightfold Path to such a degree that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. This need not take lifetimes. This need not take decades. This, according to the Buddha, in the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, we could master this in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. I think it could be great fun if together as a team we practiced right now, after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. I think it would be great fun if, together as a team, we played with the latest iteration of the vast expanse of Dharma Mind, composed oh so many centuries ago by Parahe Vajra, translated recently into English by Yeshe Donden, adapted and amplified by this bloke, what sits before you now. Please chant with me the 33rd verse. All possible circumstances of all beings and all beings in them, all rise non-duly from the pristine continuum. In the purity of divine presence, there are no distinctions as male or female. Every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation can feel as less graspable, as less permanent, as less defining, as a vast, empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although it could be tantalizing to the eye, is intangible to the hand. And this is what we mean by the pristine continuum. Continuum can also be thought of it this way. Having forsaken concentration, which reduces everything to one single point, having practiced mindfulness, which is vulnerable, passive, visceral, random, fleeting, that one point becomes a vast panorama, limitless in its potentiality. So the limitless of the continuum is a reference to mindfulness. The pristine is the reference to that which we experience even momentarily as we relax into our exhalation. No one state is superior to the other. They are both required. Just as a bird cannot take to the skies with but one wing, we need both the ultimate and the conventional practices of noticing and as well as releasing, or releasing as well as noticing. So what does non-dually mean? Well, it's quite simply this. So we breathe and we cannot help but notice distinctions, for that is what we are wired to do. As we relax into our exhalation, all distinctions seem to melt into the one flavor of being less solid, less permanent, less defining. That's all. That's all this means. All possible circumstances and all beings in them arise non duty from the pristine continuum in the purity of divine presence. There are no such distinctions as male or female. What do we mean by divine presence? Well, this is a great opportunity to add a graphic. Please bear with me. Insert picture. Let's go to pictures and Buddhist yoga, and let's go to Dorje Sampa, let's go to Vati, let's go to Solitary, let's go to the Flying Rainbow. Let's hit wrap text, let's click behind text, let's scroll so as not to confuse the software because it's Word. Let's check the display. Kawabunga. Okay, so divine presence is a delicious metaphor. When people try to combine, in Buddhist mythology, the Buddha taught there are 4 bases of mindfulness: the circumstantial, the physical, the interpersonal, and the mental. And this can be represented using ideas from Buddhist mythology, such as the mind of a Buddha being represented by a syllable, the speech of the relationships of a Buddha, the communication of a Buddha being represented by a mantra, the body of a Buddha being represented by a yidam or an archetype of light, and the circumstance or the paradise, the circumstance of a Buddha represented by a paradise or Pure Land or Vati of light. And so what we're saying with the purity of divine presence is this: as we breathe in, we can notice our circumstance, warts and all. As we relax into that exhalation, that exact same circumstance could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as Buddha's real or imagined paradise comprised only of light. As we breathe in, we can notice our body, the good stuff and the bad stuff. As we relax into our exhalation, that exact same body could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as the Buddha's real or imagined archetype or yidam comprised only of light. As we breathe in, we might notice our relationships. Hostile, beautiful, or not there. With our friends or enemies or our strangers. However, as we relax into our exhalation, those exact same relationships or lack thereof could begin to feel as if they were as non-graspable as a real or imagined mantra comprised only of light. As we breathe in, we can notice our perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. And as we relax into our exhalation, that exact same mind could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a Buddha's mind, symbolized by a syllable comprised only of light. Man, once we hit junior high, we sure did notice gender, didn't we? boy, that's just dominated our thoughts. The need to get naked and get busy was just preeminent on our minds. And that's such a primal drive, evolutionarily speaking. And yet this primal need to copulate, it too, the duality of heterosexual copulation is even itself not free from non-duality. As we breathe in, male and female could look quite different and feel quite different and perhaps sound and act quite different. But as we relax into our exhalation, our perceptions of male and female, our experience of male and female could equally be less graspable, less permanent, and less defining. And so since I've mentioned male and female, I think I'm going to swap out the artwork. One moment. Insert pictures. Let's go to Vati. Let's go over here. Yeah, things are getting crazy, so I'm going to put it behind the text. And I'm going to scroll. That's kind of hard on the eyes, isn't it? So let's change that again. And try this one. All right. And who knows, perhaps during next week's lesson, I won't have to go through all this editing. So, now that I've explained it, let's do one more run through. All possible circumstances on all beings in them arise non-dually from the present continuum. In the purity of divine presence, there are no distinctions as male or female. And now that you have endured my editing, come let us meditate. So, here we go. Let us begin the first collection of 144 breaths. We can begin by gingerly setting the great knuckle of the base of our right index finger upon the tip of our left index finger. Place these two hands in our lap. Doing so can help real or imagined energies coalesce at the crown of our head. So how are we going to collect 144 breaths? Well, that's just 12 sets of 12 repetitions. So let's begin with collecting 12 repetitions. And this is what I like to call Bengali crease counting. So, as we already mentioned, during the inhalation, we silently and mentally recite this, and during the exhalation, we silently and mentally recite ease. So what I like to do is, during each inhalation, advance the tip of my right thumb and set it upon a set of creases. Always beginning with the index finger. Please count and meditate with me. Physically count, but mentally meditate. So, Nick, congratulations. You know how to count 12 repetitions. On our left hand, we can count sets. First set, second set, third set, and the like. Well, welcome aboard. Before we begin our next collection of 144 breaths, let's chant the 34th verse. Let's do so 3 times. First a run through, the second go through will explain everything. In the domain of reality, there is no talk of getting somewhere by means of effort. Yet some say that by using the powers of sound, one can generate the bliss of a magical illusion. So this seems to be a good opportunity to add an image. One moment, I'm going to add an image of a syllable hum. And I'm going to push it behind the text. Let's see how this works out. Excellent. All right. In the domain of reality, there is no talk of getting somewhere by means of effort. So, Sturgeon's Law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, including meditation teachers. The 90% who insist that being rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, cruel, and superstitious is ideal. They think they can believe or think their way to enlightenment, but they are mistaken. The Buddha taught that it's possible to master the path in only a week. That's all. No time for to get a PhD or a Doctor of Divinity or a Kenpo or a Kenshin or a Geshe degree. There are 2 types of effort. There's effortless effort and effortful effort. Yang effort and yin effort. Yang effort is an excellent way to exhaust ourselves and perhaps feel important or look spiritual, but it will not give us the enlightenment. It will not give us the centered spontaneity, the expedient means, whereby which our choices, utterances, and deeds flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. Not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. That is the goal. That is very easily accomplished. Yet some say that by using the powers of sound, one can generate the bliss of a magical illusion. Yes, we can contrive bliss all we want. We can take illicit substances, we can play with pressure points in our body, whether using our fingers or using our mind or by having sex. We can use sounds. We can contrive an analog of spiritual accomplishment, but that's all it is. Consider, if you will, tomatoes. Go to the market and you can find packages of 6 perfectly spherical red tomatoes with the vines on it. They look beautiful, but you get them home, you take them out of the plastic, they don't smell that flavorful. You cut them into quarters or eighths and you pop it in your mouth and it's okay. It's not great. The next day you go to a farmer's market and you find a mutant looking tomato. It wouldn't know a sphere if it was humping its leg, provided it had a leg. But it's spheroid and it's not perfectly one color. But you get it home. And you give it a sniff and it smells amazing, and you quarter it, and you take a taste, and it's amazing. That's analog versus the real McCoy. We can contrive an analog of accomplishment, but it's not the real thing. far better it is to notice and release vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, fleetingly, in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation, and let our body process it. We might feel pleasure, we might feel pain, we might find something interesting, we might find something boring, we might experience something glorious, we might experience something grotesque. But the very act of noticing and releasing is in itself bliss. For it frees us from the tyranny of duality and forever shoving and reaching and clinging. So, final repetition. In the domain of reality, there is no talk of getting somewhere by means of effort. And yet some say that by using the powers of sound, one can generate the bliss of a magical illusion. My original teachers were very, very rigid. They taught separate paths to separate goals. But in time, I had the good fortune to receive teachings that were the opposite, that were flexible and loving and laid back and groovy. And they said, different paths lead to the top of the same mountain. And there's a tremendous overlapping Venn diagram between the highest facets of many spiritual paths. So if a term sounds like it belongs to another spiritual path, I would encourage you not to get hung up by it, and just practice and notice what works in your own body and mind. And now, let's practice. What is the most efficient? Oh, good morning, Mr. Kevin. What is the most efficient way to practice mindfulness? To silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during the inhalation. What is the most efficient way of practicing meditation? To silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during the exhalation. Since we are now performing our second, collection of 144 breaths, what I advise you to do is this. Gingerly rest the great knuckle at the base of your right middle finger upon the tip of your left middle finger, and rest these two hands palm up in your lap. Doing so will help the subtle energy to coalesce at your heart wheel. Let us chant the 35th verse 3 times. The true condition cannot be grasped conceptually, but appears in varied ways according to how one views it. To strive for bliss, desiring it to manifest, only just generates obscuration and confusion. So this italicized suffix infers that I've better adapted it, hopefully, for English. The true condition cannot be grasped conceptually. We can neither believe our way nor think our way to enlightenment. But we can feel our way there. But appears in varied ways according to how one views it. Rigidity can be very, very neat, but it's inauthentic. Life is messy. Birth is messy. Death is messy. And all points in between are messy. Cooking is messy. Eating is messy. Defecating is messy. Gardening is messy. Life is messy. Although we might try to hide from it, it's messy. So the true condition, as we perceive, things seem one way. As we relax into our exhalation, things seem less permanent, less solid, less defining. Yet whatever we perceive varies from moment to moment, from place to place, whether we are strictly perceiving or emoting or intending or reasoning or recalling or imagining. Our moment-to-moment perceptions are going to shift, and that makes things interesting and fun and juicy, and it's not to be avoided. To strive for bliss, desiring it to manifest, only generates obscuration and confusion. The path of foolishness is paved with rigidity and controlling tendencies. The path of wisdom is paved with flexibility and being laid back. Chasing bliss is like chasing a cat that you want to give affection to. The cat's not going to have nothing to do with it. However, theatrically march into your kitchen, open a can of tuna, and the cat will volunteer itself. Similarly, we need not chase real or imagined meditative experiences. Simply master the path of awareness and release, and everything else will take care of itself. One final recitation without commentary. The true condition cannot be grasped conceptually, but appears in varied ways according to how one views it. To strive for bliss, desiring it to manifest, only generates obscuration and confusion. Now let us gingerly place the great knuckle at the base of our right ring finger upon the tip of our left ring finger in our lap. Doing so helps the subtle energies to gather at our navel, specifically the navel wheel, which is about the size of a thumbnail or a nickel. It's horizontal, and it's about thumb's width before the spine, or so I've been told. We come now to the final quarter of this morning's practice. Please chant the 36th verse with me 3 times. Meditating on the appearances of a deity is like meditating on the reflections of the moon and water. Although such meditators have to be undefiled and unattached. Their practices are like child's play. And of course, I'm sure you're sampling my geeky sense of humor. Meditating on the appearances of a deity is like meditating on the reflections of the moon and water. In the contemporary practice of Dzogchen is divided into 3 categories, described in Sanskrit as Mahayoga, Anuyoga, and Anta-yoga, and described in Tibetan as Tokal, Tikle, and Trekcho. Gesundheit. But the author of this text takes a dim view and says all we need is noticing and releasing. We don't need to muck about with our channels once it drops. We don't need to visualize or recite mantras. And so this is one of several passages where he lampoons this, not to be sectarian, but to prevent his students from squandering their time and energy in practices that do much more harm than good. Although such meditators strive to be undefiled and unattached, their practices are like child's play. There are hundreds and thousands of adults who've devoted their lives to make-believe, to imagining sights and imagining sounds and imagining sensations, and thinking this makes them great contemplatives. It might make them the master of Vajrayana, it might make them the master of creation stage or completion stage, but it won't free them from the fundamental duality of pushing and pulling. Final recitation. Meditating on the appearances of a deity is like meditating on the reflections of the moon and water. Although such meditators strive to be undefiled and unattached, the practices are like child's play. Having come to the 4th collection of 144 breaths, we can gingerly place the great knuckle of the base of our right little finger upon the tip of our left little finger. Do you remember the most efficient way to practice mindfulness is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during each inhalation. Similarly, the most efficient way of practicing meditation is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the 1-syllable verb ease during each exhalation. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 1/4 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tonight's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.